Hey folks, welcome back. So in today's video, I'm in a great mood today. I'm feeling good. And I thought I would kind of dive into a recent little graphic that I'd made to share with you guys to explain what is really essentially a very basic concept, but I think something that a lot of us get confused with, which I'm kind of calling my inputs, self, and outputs model. And so this is kind of a model of the different, inputs into our life and how that impacts us in the middle, and then the outputs and the experiences we have around that. And it's just kind of a way to try to describe to you the different areas where we can kind of experience wounding or negative imprints in life or dysregulation, or areas to look at perhaps that have a lot of leverage in terms of, positively or negatively affecting us, how that impacts us, and then what are kind of the outputs of how we're impacted. So we'll kind of go into the more kind of granular detail about this in the share I'm about to do here. But if that interests you, and I really hope it does, because this is something to really understand about yourself when it comes to healing and growth and, self-actualization and all these wonderful things. This is really an important piece to consider. So I hope this really, is of interest to you. And if it is, please join me. Alrighty, so here is my little graphic that I made. Please don't laugh, or do have a good laugh at my expense. This is obviously a very rough graphic. I'm not a graphic designer, although I did go to school for that for a little while. I didn't finish, obviously. So this is my little kind of rough sketch attempt, which I'm sure at some point I'll make into a nicer graphic. By the way, if any of you are graphic artists and, understand this kind of thing, could help me with it, please reach out. My email is in the description down below. Okay, but enough about this. Let's get into explaining and understanding what the heck we're looking at here and why I chose the things I chose and kind of what this describes, right? So again, the idea here is that I want to describe to you essentially the different areas where we can experience wounding, right? Or where we can experience positive impacts in our life, how that impacts us, where your kind of points of leverage are here to improve your life or transform or heal. And, also looking at what are the outputs from the experience we have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just start talking about it and diving in here. So the first thing I want to point out here, obviously, is that we have this kind of inputs column here. We have our human being here, our self in the middle, and then we have our outputs column here. And this is a real rough, basic kind of systemic view at ourselves as a human being, right? This is kind of a view a lot of us don't take about ourselves. And so this, the idea here is that we can kind of start to sort through, what are my inputs? How does that impact me? And what is that output in me, right? So in terms of inputs, I've chosen these fairly carefully here. So let me just kind of go through it really quick. From my point of view, these are all massive areas of input into your nervous system that make a huge impact on your life experience and your mental health and your emotional well-being, and what seems possible to you and not possible to you and all the stuff, right? So the first one here is our evolutionary drives. By evolutionary drives, I mean essentially what you might think of as evolutionary psychology, if you're familiar with EvoPsych. This would be things like, our drive for status and our kind of fear or motivation to ascend in a status hierarchy. This would be things like, our relationship to resource scarcity. This would be things, I think, even to some degree, our attachment system, so the attachment dynamics, they're probably pre-wired in as evolutionary drives. So this is a major blind spot for a lot of us when we're coming to, therapeutic work or personal development work. A lot of us aren't aware that there are, hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary conditioning that have shaped our genetic impulses and drives to be the creature that we are. And we feel those drives as essentially fears, motivations, needs, and desires. So when we look out at current modern society, a massive portion of what you see out there in social media really boils down to unconscious, automatic, evolutionary, kind of deep genetic biological drives that we are conflating for conscious behavior, for choice, for for emotional layers of things, when really it is much more fundamental, right? So this is something to account for here. How are our evolutionary drives shaping the way we feel? How closely or out of tune are we living in relationship to our evolutionary needs and drives, right? So we are a creature that is wired up a certain way, and that way kind of is looking for, a certain set of experiences in order to feel right and safe and healthy to thrive, right? Just in the same way your dog is, of course, or your house cat or what have you, your family pet is also an animal with a certain set of needs in terms of diet and sleep and exercise and all the things. Same is true for us. So this is a major input that I think we kind of come preloaded with. We are born with genetic intelligence and genetic drives that are inherent to being a human being. The other major, another major input here would be lifestyle. I just did a recent video about this. I've talked about it a bunch of times. By lifestyle, I mean things like, again, diet, sleep, movement and exercise, how much social time you get, what do you do in your spare time? What are your interests? How engaged are you in life, in the world, and things that motivate you, excite you? How much time do you work? How much time do you rest? How much time do you play? Do you travel? Lifestyle has a huge impact, of course, in terms of inputs into you, right? Another huge, obvious one here that really does, if these all overlap and tie into each other, would be relationships, right? So obviously early relationships being a huge thing, and considering our psychology and our psychological makeup, what were the imprints from our early relationship experiences, particularly in our family of origin, right? But also, school. What were your relationships like with your teachers and authority figures? What were your relationships like with your peers and other kids on the playground? That's another huge input. As we grow up, what were our relationships like in our teenage years? Early romantic relationships, and then into our adulthood, into our 20s, 30s, and beyond. What are our relationships like with our family, with our friends, with our friends we've had for a long time, with new people, with people we're dating or married to, et cetera, including animals and non-human companions, so to speak. What are the relationships we have like? What is the quality? What's the amount of safety? What's the amount of connection? What's the emotional tone to our relationships? This is, again, zoomed out there. This is, again, a major input into us, right? The other major one that I think a lot of people don't really consider or talk about a whole lot is social conditioning, right? So another major input here is, what do you see on media? What do you see online? What are the ideas that you've kind of accumulated through the culture you grew up in, the country you grew up in, the region of the country you grew up in, your family culture, your religious culture? What are the narratives that you've kind of implicitly kind of soaked in via social osmosis, so to speak, from your environment around you, and how does that shape how you feel? Right? This would be another huge input into us, right? Then in the middle here, we have ourself, right? And the important thing that I really want you to understand, in fact, kind of the whole major reason I made this whole graphic here, is this arrow right here, this recursive arrow, and this idea of self-relationship. So I want you to understand that, at the heart, at the intersection, if you will, between your inputs and your outputs is your life. And one major place that we have leverage and impact on ourselves is in our self-relationship. So this is generally, that we are looking at ourselves and looking how we act, how we feel, what we believe, what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. And we form opinions and thoughts and beliefs, and we have a relational quality about our outputs that becomes an input back into ourselves, right? So your self-relationship is both a thing of output and a thing of input back in you. There's a loop here, right? And if we're to be really granular and more specific about it, there's actually probably a series of loops, and those loops can kind of branch off into different layers of self-relationship, because Self-relationship, of course, is probably multifaceted and complex and contextual and much more dynamic than just a simple little loop like this. But the point I really want you to gather here is that this is a place where you have a lot of leverage over yourself, where you have the power to impact and change and shape and heal or wound yourself, right? So to put this like really simply, when clients come to me and they want help and I'm kind of helping unpack what's going on and understanding their experience, almost inevitably, 9.5 or 9.9, 10 or times out of 10, excuse me, getting ahead of myself here, almost always what I see is one of the major things that the person is dealing with is like being incredibly self-critical, self-judgmental. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of being hard on oneself. I should be different. I should be better. I should be doing this. What's wrong with me? These kinds of things, right? Now, the obvious question to ask in that kind of situation, normally when you talk to someone like this, we all kind of normalize that and we say, oh yeah, that's just how it is. I'm just extra hard on myself. I'm harder on myself than anyone else is. It's kind of a cliche in our culture, and it's kind of dismissed as being normal and acceptable to be hard on ourselves, unreasonably, unfairly hard on ourselves. And the obvious question then is, what happens if we change that? What impact does that have if I change the quality of how I'm relating to myself, right? And what I've started to find and discover as I've been playing with this, and this has kind of led to what I might dare to call, if I'm being a little bold here, maybe the reverse engineering or maybe the discovery of a new modality of working with yourself, a new way of healing, kind of a new approach to, personal healing, personal transformation, kind of a therapeutic type approach, right? That I've kind of discovered that really hinges on self-relationship. And what I found is that when we correct for a bad self-relationship and improve this piece, it's a massive piece of leverage over how you feel and therefore, your behavior and what comes out of you on the other side. So self-relationship is this interesting, complex place where we have a lot of actual control over what we experience. Because, when it comes to inputs, we don't always have a lot of control. Obviously, over our evolutionary drives, we have no control. We don't have, we do have control over our lifestyle, but a lot of times we're raised in a situation where we didn't. Relationships, often, same thing. We don't have a lot of control over our relationships. Social conditioning, is kind of just coming at you from birth. Again, these are things that we do have some control over, but a lot of it we don't, right? And then with our outputs, these are often habituated, automatic, unconscious things that come out of us. And again, we do have control over them, but at first it doesn't feel like it. So the place where we can really consciously start to leverage and take control that has a lot of impact is our self-relationship. Okay, let's talk about outputs here. So, essentially, I'm looking at inputs as these different domains where we can have, where we can be easily wounded or have a lot of negative impact come at us, right? The outputs are what happens. So, depending on, what happened to you, your output could be symptoms, automatic symptoms that you have, right? I would lump depression or anxiety in this category of, symptoms, right? Having triggers would be a symptom. Having aversions to things, avoidance, having an insecure attachment stuff, that's kind of a symptom, of some sort of wounding over on the input side and how that impacted you, right? So symptoms are a major, key output. And this is usually obviously when we're going to self-help or personal development or going to a therapist or a coach. This is the thing that we notice. We go, gosh, I've got this symptom and it's really a problem in my life and it really sucks for me and I want to change that, right? Another big one, and so at first glance, when you look at these, symptoms, habits, reactions, beliefs, behaviors, it may not be obvious that these are the outputs to choose here. But if you really think about it, symptoms are usually what we're struggling with, right? Another major one is habits, right? What are my habits of thought, my habits of emotion, obviously my habits of behavior? What are my healthy habits? What are my unhealthy habits? This is another major, cue or thing to look at. And this, for example, is a major place where people end up struggling. Gosh, I've got a habit that I really don't like about myself, right? So that impacts my self relationship. I become judgmental about my habit, but it's a habit. I don't feel like I have control over it. It's an instinctive, impulsive, kind of automatic thing that happens from my unconscious. I just find myself doing it. Then I judge myself about it. Then I feel more terrible, et cetera, right? So you can see how there can be kind of, self-relationship to any of this stuff, and that can really feed back and, create an upward or a downward spiral depending on the quality of our self-relationship. Another major output piece here would be reactions. What are my automatic reactions to different contexts and situations, right? Do I shut down and get quiet and shy in a social situation, for example? That's a bit of a reaction, right? You don't mean to do that. It's just kind of what your body does. Do I get unreasonably angry when I encounter, a certain commercial, for example, on TV? That's a bit of a reaction, right? Do I become, overwhelmingly excited or happy when I, see a certain person or hear a certain band? Again, that's a reaction, not necessarily a bad one, but it is a kind of an automatic reaction. So this is another output of how your system has been kind of programmed by the inputs in your life, right? So this is learned automatic behavior. Beliefs, same thing, right? So this is often a lot of times where people struggle. I have these beliefs, they feel true to me, they feel real, but I know logically they're not really all that rational or all that healthy, or, set me back and, kind of work against me, right? So beliefs would be another one that, depending on what kind of inputs you've had, if your inputs are that you get to meet your evolutionary drives easily, your lifestyle's healthy, your relationships are healthy, your social conditioning is positive, your beliefs about yourself or about life or about others might be very positive and very relaxed and very trusting. If on the other hand, you feel really stuck with, lifestyle or evolutionary drives, right? You're not working, you're not motivated, you feel a lot of shame for, feel like hard on yourself and upset that you're kind of not, leveling up. Your relationships are kind of toxic or insecure. You've had a lot of negative social conditioning, a lot of judgment, a lot of whatever, growing up. Then your beliefs are probably going to be very different, right? So beliefs, again, are another cue. They're a pointer towards self-relationship, but also towards your inputs. And of course, the last one here that's pretty obvious is behaviors. What choices and behaviors and actions do you take? What behaviors do you not take, right? What are the behaviors that you should be doing that you're not? What are the behaviors that maybe you shouldn't be doing that you are? Whether these are, addictions, whether these are, behaviors of avoiding certain things that would be empowering or positive or healing in your life, behaviors of, engaging in things that tend to be destructive or unhealthy for you or not safe, behaviors that keep you kind of at a low level and keep you stuck, right? Again, your behaviors are an output, right, of this system that has had certain experiences in terms of inputs that really have shaped and impacted you. And then, your observation about your beliefs or about your behaviors or about your reactions or habits or symptoms, will really massively impact how you feel. And what we see a lot, for example, in like a self-destructive loop is something like I have, habits and beliefs and behaviors that aren't all that healthy and are disappointing and make me sad and keep me low functioning, but I'm self-aware of that. I realize that, and then I'm really hard on myself. I judge myself, and then that makes me feel really bad. And then, of course, what does that do? That drives worse symptoms or more of the same habits or more reinforcement of the negative beliefs or more of the behaviors that I know don't serve me in life, right? And so we can look at the quality of our outputs, and we can look at these different areas of inputs, both historically, through the lens of history and, what were my inputs like when I was younger, and how did that impact me? How did that make me feel? And how does that drive me, in terms of these outputs? But you can also look at it real time, currently in your life. What is the quality of your inputs right now? How are you relating to your evolutionary drives? How are you relating lifestyle wise? What are you doing lifestyle wise? What's going on with your relationships and the quality of your relationships? Are you in a situation relationally that's good for you, that's healthy? How are you relating to social conditioning, which, let's be frank, with online and social media, is more pervasive and kind of intense than ever, right? What are you doing in relationship to these inputs? And, how do they make you feel? How could you improve them so that you feel better? How could you, and this is my big thing I'll be talking about a lot more, is how could you improve your self-relationship? In other words, how could you relate compassionately, empathetically, with wisdom, with patience, with kindness, with, engagement and, love for yourself? How could you relate in a way like that, that improves, that becomes a new input that's more healing, that then improves, any symptoms you have, improves and up levels any habits you have, maybe nullifies any reactions that are kind of, out of control, improves beliefs about yourself or about life, and shifts your behaviors. So this is, again, a very simple model. I just kind of, it's a little rough around the edges here. But I just want to make this to kind of communicate this idea to you guys, that these are areas you can look to get a sense of where the wounding might have been, excuse me, in the past, or areas where you can improve and transform that are high leverage. The punchline here really is that this right here, this self-relationship piece, is a major, doable, high leverage piece that I've found when I teach people how to relate to themselves in a better way, they start really having a healing, transformative experience inside their own skin. And that massively improves, either choosing better inputs or experiencing better outputs in themselves. So thought I'd just share this with you guys. I hope you find it useful. And if you do, please do me a favor and do the usual YouTube stuff, the thumbs up, the like, the comment, the subscribe if you're not a subscriber to the channel yet. And, leave a comment down below. Does this open up a new insight? Is this something you kind of already know? Is this an aha moment for you? I'd love to know what you think of my rather basic, cheesy graphic here and what I'm communicating with it. So thanks for watching. Much love to you all. I hope you're having a beautiful day out there, and I will talk to you soon.